Madison Reed, 19 years old, walked into the Denver County courtroom with a terrifying arrogance, flashing a slight smile at the hateful glares from the family of the man she was accused of brutally murdering. Ethan Cole. Confident that her youth would serve as a shield to escape conviction, she treated the trial like a joke, casually listening to the charges about the horrific crime she was accused of committing. But what made the entire courtroom shudder was not the police evidence or the prosecutor's indictment, but Madison's cold demeanor and emotionless smile, something that made people wonder if she was even human anymore. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On the evening of February 14, 2009, darkness fell over the quiet streets of the Cherry Creek neighborhood in Denver, Colorado, bringing with it the dry, biting cold typical of a mountain winter. A thin layer of snow lingering from the early week blizzard covered the meticulously trimmed lawns evenly, reflecting the dim light from the solitary street lamps. Each house was a small fortress of warmth and daily routine, their golden-lit windows pushing back against the encroaching darkness swallowing the neighborhood. In a modest second-floor apartment on East Dakota Avenue, Ethan Cole, 27 years old, was wrapping up a long day of work. The smell of cooled coffee and the quiet hum of his computer lingered in the cramped space. He was a software engineer at a tech company in downtown, known for his dedication, punctuality, and humility. Ethan's life followed a steady rhythm: work, exercise, weekends reading books or calling his mother. He was the kind of person neighbors easily admired, polite, friendly, unassuming. No one knew that his orderly life was now measured in minutes, and the familiar quiet of the neighborhood would soon be torn apart by senseless violence that was hard to believe. The peace of Cherry Creek was just an illusion, a thin veneer covering a darkness creeping through the clean streets and bare, leafless trees. Ethan had lived there for 3 years, seen as a model of stability and kindness. On that Valentine's night, when most residents were asleep, he drove his black sedan home, late from the office, stopping at the convenience store at the end of the block to pick up a few items. The atmosphere was so still that only the wind whistling over the frozen sidewalk and the crunch of tires on snow could be heard. As Ethan stepped out of the store and headed toward his car, a silver sedan quietly pulled up at the end of the street. Headlights off, engine nearly silent. 3 gunshots rang out, short and decisive, ripping through the night. Ethan collapsed beside his car, blood soaking the white snow beneath him. The silver sedan sped away, leaving behind only tire tracks and an eerie silence. No signs of a struggle, no property taken. The attack was not a failed robbery or an impulsive act of anger. It was the intrusion of pure malice, a brutal act carrying no reason beyond its own existence, a violence so stark that investigators later would search for a motive that simply did not exist. The first official record of the case was logged at 10:58 p.m. when a resident from a nearby apartment complex called 911, reporting 3 loud bangs and a silver car speeding away. The dispatcher only heard a few panicked words before the line went dead. A terrifying silence enveloped the neighborhood, and 2 patrol cars were dispatched to the scene immediately. When police arrived, the dashboard clock read 11:06 p.m., flashing red and blue lights reflected off the wet snow, stretching into cold streaks of light on the icy road. The once quiet parking lot now held only the wind and the heavy footsteps of officers approaching. A few meters from the black sedan, the body of a young man lay motionless, half buried in snow, blood pooling dark around him. It was Ethan Cole. No signs of a struggle. His car door was still open, keys in the ignition. The paper bag of items, just bought from the convenience store, had been blown over by the wind, scattering a few small goods on the pavement. His wallet still held his ID, bank cards, and cash intact. Everything was in place, except the life of its owner. Forensic personnel quickly set up yellow tape to seal off the area, flashing lights casting shadows on somber faces. 3 shell casings were found a few steps from the body, all 9 mm. Tire tracks were deeply imprinted in the snow, running from the curb to near the body, and then turning to leave, as if the car had stopped just long enough to fire. The officer in charge of the scene noted briefly, "No signs of robbery, no conflict. This was intentional." That remark was entered into the preliminary case report, a cold statement marking the start of what would become a lengthy investigation. By 11:40 p.m., the victim's body was transported to the Denver County morgue. The initial autopsy report confirmed Ethan was shot 3 times at close range, one in the chest, one through the shoulder, and one in the abdomen. Any of the shots could have been fatal. The tire mark over his left leg was determined to be from the departing vehicle right after he fell. Every trace pointed to this not being an impulsive act or robbery, but a cold, controlled murder. News of the shooting spread quickly within hours. By dawn, the scene was surrounded by reporters from local TV stations. The yellow tape fluttered lightly in the wind, the dark bloodstain stark against the white snow. The Denver Post's first morning report led with the headline, "27-year-old man shot dead in peaceful neighborhood, no clear motive." The phrase "random act of violence" began appearing in morning broadcasts, reflecting the confusion spreading through the community. Around 4 a.m., 2 detectives were sent to Boulder to deliver the bad news to the victim's family. Karen Cole, Ethan's mother, opened the door still half asleep. Upon hearing the word "deceased," she stood frozen for a few seconds, then collapsed on the doorstep. The mother couldn't believe her only son, the one who had called her just last Sunday evening to ask about dinner, was dead for a reason no one could understand. He had no enemies, was all she could say, then fell silent for a long time. In the hours that followed, information about Ethan spread across Denver. Friends, colleagues, neighbors were all stunned. At the company where he worked, management held an emergency meeting and allowed employees to take the morning off. A colleague said, "Ethan was the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave. He only cared about work and family, never raised his voice to anyone." In the Cherry Creek complex, residents gathered around the parking lot, placing flowers, candles, and handwritten cards. On the snow, a small wooden sign was staked into the ground, with scrawled words, "Rest in peace, Ethan. We will find who did this." By noon, major state TV stations were all broadcasting about the case. In the evening news, the anchor called it the murder that woke up the city. Under public pressure, the Denver Police Department held an emergency press conference at 6 p.m. The chief affirmed the case would be investigated thoroughly and urged the public to provide any relevant information. "An innocent person was murdered on our streets," he said, "and we will not let silence be the only answer." At the same time, investigators began reviewing footage from traffic and security cameras in the area. They obtained video from a camera at an intersection near the scene, showing a silver sedan leaving just minutes after the shots were fired. The license plate was unclear, but the footage became the first lead in the case file. On the night of February 15th, exactly 24 hours after the shooting, the Cherry Creek neighborhood still couldn't return to peace. Fresh snow covered the extinguished candles, frost-covered flower bouquets lay scattered on the sidewalk. Residents in the area began locking doors more carefully, limiting going out at night. From a community long seen as a model of safety, Cherry Creek now sank into unease and fear. No one knew what really happened, only that a kind man had died for no reason, and a killer was still out there, silent in the sleeping city. After the scene was cleared and samples transferred to the lab, the Denver Police Department's Special Investigation Team began work on the morning of February 16th. The first goal was to trace the path of the silver sedan that multiple witnesses confirmed seeing leave the area just minutes after the shots. A map of the area, extending more than 3 miles around the scene, was spread out on the table. They started reviewing all traffic and residential security cameras on every road out of Cherry Creek. Hundreds of hours of footage were extracted and analyzed continuously over 2 days. By the afternoon of February 17th, a key discovery emerged from the camera at a Circle K gas station less than a mile south of the scene. In the video recorded at 10:43 p.m., just 15 minutes before the shooting, a silver sedan pulled into the station. The driver was a young woman with blonde hair tied high, wearing a black leather jacket. She entered the store, bought 2 sodas and a pack of snacks, chatted with the cashier for a few dozen seconds, then left. The vehicle's direction matched perfectly with the route to the parking lot where Ethan was shot. The final frame captured the license plate, blurry but clear enough to identify. When the data was enhanced with image processing software, the sequence of numbers and letters confirmed the vehicle's owner as Madison Reed, born 1990, residing in Colorado Springs, about 110 kilometers from Denver. Immediately, the investigation team pulled up personal information records. Madison Reed, female, 19 years old, U.S. national, had attended 1 semester at the University of Colorado Springs before dropping out without reason. Police records showed 2 traffic violations in the previous year, 1 for speeding, 1 for driving while using a phone. Additionally, Madison had been warned for disorderly conduct at a local bar, then released since she was underage for drinking. No serious criminal record, not on any special watch list. The driver's license photo showed a young woman with a bright face, confident smile, slightly arrogant eyes, no indication of any connection to a murder. However, digital evidence gradually made things clearer. Police checked purchase history via the gas card registered to Madison, discovering a transaction at the Circle K at the exact time the car appeared in the video. The integrated GPS in the card showed her vehicle traveling from Colorado Springs to Denver that afternoon and leaving the city around midnight, the precise time frame of the shooting. Traffic camera data on I-25 North also recorded the plate around 9 p.m., proving Madison was in Denver before the crime. In parallel with gathering evidence, investigators interviewed the gas station employee who had directly served her. He described Madison as calm, somewhat cold, not rushed, and seemingly in a good mood. He remembered clearly, because she smiled while paying and made a short joke, he no longer recalled exactly. The witness confirmed no one was with her, and the silver car left the station quietly. The pieces began to fall into place. Madison Reed owned the vehicle that matched witness statements, appeared in the area of the crime scene right before the murder occurred, and had a travel route consistent with traffic data. The image analysis report from nearby residential CCTV systems also detected the same vehicle passing through a route near the parking lot at approximately 10:55 p.m., just 3 minutes before the 911 call was recorded. The match was nearly perfect. The lead investigation team, Lieutenant Alan Brooks, convened an emergency meeting to compile all the evidence. He concluded that this was the first and possibly only suspect in the case. The physical evidence, cameras, license plate, GPS data, and witness statements was strong enough to obtain an arrest warrant. In the command room, Brooks stated briefly, "We don't know why she did it, but every road leads to Madison Reed." That same night, officers submitted the file to the Denver County Court to request an emergency arrest warrant. The duty judge signed it at 10:37 p.m. on February 17, 2009, authorizing search and arrest within 48 hours. An internal bulletin was sent out, suspect Madison Reed, 19 years old, driving a silver sedan, possibly armed. Priority: confirm current location, avoid direct confrontation. By that point, the investigation had shifted from the clue-gathering phase to identifying the suspect. In less than 3 days since the shooting, the Denver Police Department had a name, a face, and a clear pursuit direction. Madison's driver's license photo was printed and distributed to every unit involved in the case. Beneath the photo was a red underlined line, present in Denver on the night of the murder. As the warrant was signed, Lieutenant Brooks reviewed the file one last time. In his mind, he still couldn't comprehend what drove a 19-year-old girl with no criminal record, no grudges, to be in the right place at the right time and driving the very car tied to such a brutal murder. He only knew one thing from this moment. Madison Reed was no longer an anonymous name on a suspect list. She had officially become the center of the largest investigation Denver had seen that year. On the morning of February 18, 2009, as the sun rose over the snow-covered Rocky Mountains, a Denver Police Department SWAT team, in coordination with Colorado Springs Police, executed the arrest of the suspect under the warrant signed the previous night. Madison Reed's apartment was on the third floor of an old building on Pikes Peak Avenue, about a 10-minute drive from downtown. As the team approached, the door was locked, curtains drawn, but the silver sedan identified in the case file was parked right at the curb. At 6:25 a.m., police knocked and announced the arrest warrant. Madison opened the door after just a few seconds, wearing a thick jacket, hair messy, face showing no sign of surprise. As an officer read her Miranda rights, she simply said, "I understand." No resistance, no questions, no confusion. During the search of her vehicle, investigators discovered a 9mm handgun in the trunk, the same type as the rounds recovered at the scene. Inside were also a half-empty box of ammunition, leather gloves, and a few personal items. The gun was immediately sealed as evidence and sent to the Denver Ballistics Lab for barrel and casing comparison. Additionally, police seized her phone, laptop, and 2 gas cards in Madison Reed's name. All physical evidence matched the silver car's travel records on the night of the murder. Madison was placed in a police car and transported to Denver that same morning. Sitting in the back seat, hands cuffed in front, she stared out the window the entire hour-and-a-half drive, saying nothing. An accompanying officer noted in the report, "No signs of fear or panic," remained silent, seemingly calculating. At 9:10 a.m., Madison was brought into Interrogation Room 3 at Denver Police Headquarters. The small room contained only a metal table, 2 facing chairs, and an automatic recording camera. The 2 lead investigators, Lieutenant Alan Brooks and Officer Megan Lawson, conducted the first interrogation. On camera, Madison confirmed her full name, date of birth, and residential address. When asked if she understood her rights, she replied briefly, "Yes, I don't need a lawyer." From the very first minutes, Madison completely denied any involvement in the murder. She claimed that on the evening of February 14th, she only drove to Denver to clear her head and happened to stop at the Circle K convenience store to buy things. When Lieutenant Brooks asked why she was in the Cherry Creek area at the time of the murder, she replied, "I got lost. I'm not familiar with the roads there." Her voice was even and soft, showing no tension. The investigators presented evidence one by one: the gas station video, GPS data from the gas card, tire tracks, matching those at the scene. Madison stuck to her story, insisting she just happened to pass through and knew nothing about the shooting. When Brooks asked about the gun in her trunk, she said it was her father's old gun, kept for self-defense, and hadn't been used in months. By noon, the ballistics lab sent preliminary results. The striations on the casings recovered at the scene matched the barrel of the gun found in Madison's car. The report was delivered directly to the interrogation room. When Brooks placed it on the table, Madison glanced at it, then turned her cold gaze to him. "If you're so sure, why are you still asking me?" That short statement left the room silent for several seconds. Police continued, pressing for details about her movements on the night of the murder. They presented traffic system data, showing the silver car passing an intersection near the scene at exactly 10:55 p.m., just 3 minutes before the 911 call. Madison fell silent, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. After nearly 6 hours of questioning, she finally admitted to being in Cherry Creek that evening, but still denied firing the shots. "I stopped the car for a moment because I heard bangs somewhere," she said. "I got scared, so I left." Investigator Lawson recorded every statement while noting how Madison recounted events without hesitation, without fear, even occasionally flashing a faint smile. Her demeanor was the complete opposite of what is typically seen in a suspect facing clear evidence. When asked if she felt regret or pity for the deceased, Madison replied, "I don't know who he was. I have nothing to say." In the internal report after the interrogation, Lieutenant Brooks wrote clearly, "Subject displayed unusual calmness, no emotional response when informed of the case consequences, composed reactions, tendency to challenge, indicating self-control and possible premeditation." To verify further, police took Madison's fingerprints and compared them to those lifted from the gun. Results matched at 3 locations: grip, trigger, and slide. This was the first direct evidence linking her to the murder weapon. When confronted with the results, Madison merely shrugged and said, "I handled my own gun. Nothing unusual." The interrogation lasted nearly 9 hours, with short breaks interspersed. Investigators took turns asking questions, trying to find inconsistencies in her story. But Madison answered dryly and without error. Every detail about the trip, stop times, even the gas station purchase, matched technical data, except her claim of not hearing any gunshots. As the day ended, Brooks concluded the session with a direct statement: "Madison, a lot of people drove through Denver that night, but only one appeared on camera, in the silver car, at the exact place and time, and that person is you." Madison looked straight at him, voice calm. "Then believe what you want." She was taken to a holding cell immediately afterward to await preliminary charging decisions. In the summary report to department leadership, the investigation team unanimously assessed that Madison Reed was not just a key witness, but likely the direct perpetrator. They determined her behavior was proactive, prepared, and her composure throughout the interrogation indicated this was not the reaction of someone accidentally caught in trouble, but of someone who fully understood their position and what they faced. For those present in the room that day, the final impression of Madison was not fear or remorse, but a chilling indifference, a coldness that convinced them the Cherry Creek murder was not the result of a momentary impulse, but the act of a will that had already chosen the path of crime. The Ethan Cole case file was transferred to the Denver County District Attorney's Office on the morning of February 20, 2009, just 2 days after Madison Reed's arrest. The lead prosecutor was Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Miles, an experienced attorney with nearly 10 years in violent crime cases. Upon receipt, Miles and her team began reviewing the entire file, evidence and interrogation transcripts provided by the Denver Police Department. The goal was to determine if there was sufficient legal basis to charge first-degree murder, murder in the first degree, meaning premeditated and deliberate killing. The evidence in the case was deemed strong and highly binding. The first and most critical piece was the 9mm handgun recovered from Madison's trunk. The ballistics report from the department's forensic lab confirmed striations on the 3 casings found at the scene matched the gun's barrel completely. The accompanying report stated the probability of random coincidence is virtually 0. Next were Madison's fingerprints found on multiple parts of the gun, grip, trigger, and slide, all clear and fully matching samples taken from the suspect during interrogation. The second piece, reinforcing premeditation, was victim blood found on the front right tire of the silver sedan. DNA testing by the Denver County Forensic Laboratory confirmed the blood sample matched Ethan Cole's biological profile exactly. The blood was in a drag pattern, indicating the vehicle drove over the victim's body immediately after he fell, consistent with the injuries described in the autopsy report. This eliminated any possibility of accident or fleeing in panic, as Madison had claimed. The third piece came from digital data. When examining the laptop seized from Madison's apartment, the DA's tech investigation team discovered browser history showing multiple searches in the 2 weeks before the crime with phrases close-range gunshot fatalities, fastest lethal shot placement, murder sentences in Colorado, and how long police take to trace shell casings. Despite Madison having no prior record or firearm history, this search chain indicated preparation, at least conceptually, for the crime. Miles viewed this as direct digital evidence supporting premeditation. In parallel, the final forensic autopsy report by Denver County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Alan Kurtz, completed on February 21, provided expert conclusions. Victim Ethan Cole was shot 3 times at approximately 2 meters, front-facing. Chest and abdominal wounds caused acute blood loss and death within less than a minute. Bullet trajectory and distance completely ruled out self-defense or accidental discharge. The shooting occurred while the victim showed no aggressive or resistant behavior. Dr. Kurtz wrote, All indications point to intentional premeditated homicide, executed quickly, accurately, and without provocation. These pieces of evidence were compiled into a memorandum of evidence over 70 pages long, submitted to ADA Rebecca Miles and the district's chief prosecutor for charging consideration. After multiple internal meetings, Miles concluded the file was solid enough to charge murder in the first degree under Colorado Revised Statutes Section 18-3102, carrying a maximum sentence of life without parole. She also proposed adding a secondary charge of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. On February 24, 2009, the DA's office formally filed charges against Madison Reed in Denver County Court, including the list of evidence and anticipated witnesses. The indictment stated, "Defendant Madison Reed intentionally deprived citizen Ethan Cole of life, demonstrated by approaching the victim, using a deadly weapon, and fleeing the scene without seeking aid." Per procedure, a public defender was appointed for Madison since she could not afford private counsel. The assigned attorney was James Holloway, 45, a veteran of the Colorado Public Defender's Office. Holloway met his client for the first time at Denver County Jail. In an internal memo, he described Madison as unusually calm, tending to view her case as an intellectual test. She showed no concern about sentencing, only asking details about trial procedures and timelines. While the defense began reviewing the file, ADA Miles continued strengthening the prosecution by gathering additional witness statements and technical reports. The Circle K gas station clerk was subpoenaed as the first witness, confirming Madison's presence before the crime. The crime scene tech team added photos of casings, tire tracks, and area diagrams. Each document was copied and sealed to ensure legal admissibility in court. By late March, the investigation was complete. The prosecution and defense proceeded to a preliminary hearing in county court, where the judge evaluated evidence sufficiency. After nearly 2 hours of review, the court accepted the charges and advanced the case to formal trial. The trial was scheduled for August 3, 2010, after 6 months of preparation time needed for both sides to finalize files, summon witnesses, and arrange the jury schedule. In the final report to the chief prosecutor, ADA Rebecca Miles wrote, "This is a textbook case of motiveless murder. Physical, digital, and forensic evidence all converge, pointing to a deliberate choice to cause the victim's death. The office's goal is to prove not just the crime, but the cold calculation behind it." As she signed the final indictment, Miles paused for a few seconds, looking at Madison's photo in the file. A 19-year-old girl, bright face, indifferent eyes. In the silence of her office, the document's final line confirmed the prosecution's decision: Madison Reed, charged with first-degree murder. On August 3, 2010, more than a year and a half after the fateful night in Cherry Creek, Madison Reed's trial officially began at Denver County Court. From early morning, dozens of reporters and TV vans packed the courthouse entrance. The name Madison Reed had been a regular headline for months. A 19-year-old charged with first-degree murder in what police called senseless violence. To the public, Madison's image lay somewhere between two extremes: a cold, emotionless killer and a lost child in a cruel world. But to the prosecution, this was simply a premeditated, planned murder executed without remorse. Courtroom 4 was packed. Behind the press section, the victim's family sat silently, eyes red after nearly 2 years awaiting justice. Ethan Cole, the kind man murdered on Valentine's night, was now remembered only through photos and the words, "in loving memory," on a memorial plaque outside his former workplace. The atmosphere was heavy, broken only by the clerk's keyboard clicks and the steady rustle of papers from attorneys. At 9:30 a.m., Judge Harold Bennett entered and declared the trial open. Madison Reed was led in wearing a light blue prison jumpsuit, hair neatly tied, face calm to the point of incomprehension. She sat at the defendant's table, staring straight ahead, neither bowing her head nor glancing at the victim's family. TV cameras captured the moment, a young woman facing the court for the first time, showing no fear. Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Miles, representing the prosecution, spoke first. Her voice was clear and firm. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will hear about a murder with no reason, no conflict, no motive, only coldness and indifference." Miles briefly outlined the investigation. Madison drove to Denver on February 14th, stopped at Circle K, drove to Cherry Creek, paused, fired 3 shots into a stranger, and left the scene as if it were routine. She emphasized this was not impulsive, but the result of clear preparation. Weapon carried, timing matched, and computer searches, showing prior research. On the large screen, Miles displayed the first physical evidence, images of the silver car, the 9mm gun, and copies of online search history. Each detail was read slowly and carefully, etching into the jury's minds. Madison Reed, she concluded, did not kill out of fear or self-defense. She killed to see what it felt like. On the other side, Public Defender James Holloway stood to deliver his opening statement. He did not deny Madison was at the scene or challenge the physical evidence. Instead, he took a different approach, portraying Madison as a directionless young woman, easily influenced, and in psychological crisis after leaving home. He stressed that his client lacked maturity, lacked emotional control, and did not comprehend the consequences. Holloway spoke with restraint, balancing sympathy and reason. "She is not a monster. She is a 19-year-old girl who didn't know how to face the real world." Some people in the courtroom bowed their heads. A few reporters scribbled quickly, while Madison sat still, her gaze distant. The defense attorney concluded his presentation with a request. "I ask the jury to listen not only with their hearts, but with reason. Look at the circumstances, the age, the emotional damage Madison has endured before passing judgment." Judge Bennett then explained the trial procedure and instructed the jury members to remain objective. He emphasized that the verdict must be based on evidence, not emotion, that everyone in this room, whether prosecutor or defendant, is subject to the law and the truth. The morning passed in strict order. The jury members listened, took notes, showed no reaction. The media was confined to a separate area, but within a few hours, the first headlines appeared on online news. Madison Reed appears in court, calm face, amid murder charges. Denver residents followed the trial on local television, many expressing outrage at the defendant's coldness, while others still believed she might just be a victim of youthful misguidance. By late afternoon, the judge allowed a recess for both sides to prepare detailed evidence presentations for the next day. As police escorted Madison out of the room, she paused for a moment, glanced toward the reporters, then walked away without a word. The metal door closed behind her, leaving in the courtroom a heavy atmosphere. The silence of those who had begun to understand that this case was not just a crime, but a test of their faith in justice and the boundary between humanity and cruelty. On the third day of the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as a drawn bowstring when Judge Harold Bennett allowed defendant Madison Reed to voluntarily address the jury. She stepped up to the witness stand, walking straight and slowly. All eyes turned to the young woman, described as calm to the point of chilling throughout the preceding trial days. Madison gripped the edge of the stand, glanced at the gallery, then spoke clearly, without trembling. "I want to tell my side. I didn't kill anyone." Her opening sentence caused a few people in the public seats to whisper, but Madison paid no attention. She recounted the evening of February 14th, 2009, in a flat, emotionless voice, as if reading from an old transcript. According to her, that day she drove alone from Colorado Springs to Denver to meet a friend. She admitted stopping at the Circle K gas station, as shown in the prosecution's video, but denied any criminal intent. "I just stopped to buy drinks and gas. Then a man I knew called and told me to pick him up in Cherry Creek. I didn't know what was going to happen," she said, eyes fixed on the judge. Prosecutor Rebecca Miles took quick notes, then stood for cross-examination. "What was that man's name?" Madison paused for a few seconds, then replied, "I don't know his real name. Everyone called him Ray." She claimed this man was the one holding the gun, while she just sat in the car, not knowing what he was going to do. According to Madison, when they arrived at the parking area, Ray told her to stop. "He got out. I heard 3 bangs, Then he ran back, yelled at me to drive. I panicked and did what he said, she recounted. I didn't know who was shot, didn't see anything. Miles let her finish, then stepped forward, voice calm but sharp. You say you didn't know the victim, didn't see what happened. But residential security camera footage shows only one person exiting the silver car, and that person was you. Madison pressed her lips together, replied briefly. Cameras aren't always clear, Miles continued. No other figure, no man named Ray, and your fingerprints were found on the gun used to kill Ethan Cole. Madison shrugged. It's my gun, but I didn't pull the trigger. The prosecution presented further evidence from the autopsy report. 3 shots fired at close range, from the position of someone facing the victim. According to the crime scene description, the shooter was less than 2 meters away. If you were in the car, how did the victim's blood end up on the front tire? Miles pressed. Madison lowered her head slightly, eyes cold. I told you, I drove off right after. Maybe he fell in front of the car. I don't know. Her nonchalant answer caused angry murmurs throughout the gallery. The judge had to bang the gavel to restore order. Madison stood still, arms crossed in front of the stand, face showing no remorse or fear. The prosecutor shifted direction, asking about the computer searches. Do you remember looking up phrases like close-range gunshot fatalities and murder sentences in Colorado in the week before the crime? Madison answered quickly. Don't remember. I search a lot of things. Maybe someone else used my computer. Miles raised an eyebrow. Someone else? You live alone. Madison fell silent, looked down for a few seconds, then raised her head with a faint smile. I can't explain everything. Throughout the cross-examination, Madison maintained a strange demeanor, not fearful, not angry, but seemingly enjoying the attention focused on her. When the prosecution asked about her emotions upon learning the victim was dead, Madison replied in a flat, empty voice. I didn't know him. It's unfortunate, but I can't do anything. That statement caused Ethan's mother to burst into tears in the front row, needing to be helped outside. Madison glanced over briefly, then returned to the microphone, without blinking. It was defense attorney James Holloway's turn. He tried to adjust his client's tone, asking her to explain more about the fear she felt witnessing the event. Madison responded indifferently, I was scared, but not panicked. I just wanted to leave. Holloway tried to emphasize her immaturity, asking, You were only 19 at the time. Did you understand that leaving the scene was wrong? Madison raised an eyebrow, smiled sarcastically. I figured the police wouldn't believe me if I told the truth, and it looks like I was right. The confidence mixed with defiance in her words stunned the entire courtroom. The prosecutor seized the opportunity, interjecting, You're right about one thing, Madison. You think you're smarter than everyone here. Madison turned, replied directly, Not smarter, just that I understand you've already decided the conclusion. The judge had to remind both to follow proper procedure, but the damage was clear. Madison's image before the jury was no longer that of an innocent young girl, but of someone cold, confident to the point of arrogance. The evasive answers, indifferent shrugs, and faint sarcastic smiles were enough to paint the portrait of a person without remorse. Before concluding the testimony, Prosecutor Miles asked one final question. If there really was a man named Ray, and he was the shooter, why didn't you report it during the past year and a half? Madison looked straight ahead, voice slow. Because no one wants to hear the truth. Then she turned and stepped down from the stand, gaze empty, without bothering to acknowledge the judge. As the door to the holding area closed, the courtroom was left with a heavy atmosphere. The jury sat silent, a few shaking their heads. Prosecutor Miles gathered her files, face expressionless, but her eyes said it all. Madison Reed had just destroyed herself. The indifferent testimony, cold attitude, and contempt for the court had transformed her from a suspect into a symbol of inexplicable cruelty, and in everyone's eyes, there seemed no doubt about the hand that pulled the trigger on that winter night in Cherry Creek. After the defendant's testimony, Prosecutor Rebecca Miles stepped to the center of the courtroom, holding a thick file. Her voice was calm, clear, but resolute. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, at this point, what you have heard is not the truth, but a desperate attempt to conceal the truth. Miles paused for a few seconds, letting the rustle of papers and the silence in the room add weight to each word. Defendant Madison Reed has lied, and today we will prove it with evidence, not emotion, not speculation, but legal fact. On the large screen, Miles displayed the first images, the 3 shell casings recovered at the scene, each detail enlarged to show the distinctive barrel striations. She walked to the prosecution table, held up the ballistics report. "These bullets," she said, "were fired from the 9mm handgun seized from the defendant's trunk. Not a similar gun, not another weapon, exactly that gun." The lab confirmed complete matches in rifling marks and firing pin impressions. The probability of random coincidence is virtually zero. On the next screen, fingerprint images appeared, 3 clear locations on the grip, trigger, and slide. "These are Madison Reed's fingerprints," Miles said, pointing to the screen, "and these are the comparison results certified by 3 independent experts. Fingerprints don't lie. They place the defendant at the time and place of the crime, with her hand gripping the gun." Miles continued, voice lower, slower. "But fingerprints are not all. The front right tire of the silver sedan, the car owned and driven by the defendant, had the victim's blood on it. DNA results match 100% with Ethan Cole's biological profile. The blood smear is 1.2 meters long, proving the tire rolled over the victim's body immediately after he fell." A few sharp breaths came from the back rows. Ethan's mother bowed her head, clutching a family member's hand. As the atmosphere grew heavy, Miles moved to digital evidence. "This is the laptop seized from the defendant's apartment," she said, opening a new slide. "In the browser history are searches made in the 2 weeks before the crime." She read each line slowly, letting everyone grasp its weight. "Close-range gunshot fatalities, fastest lethal shot placement. Murder sentences in Colorado. How long police take to trace shell casings." She looked up at the jury. "This is not youthful curiosity. This is research before action." Then Miles revealed new evidence that nearly made the room hold its breath. "We extracted text messages sent from Madison Reed's phone to a friend named Alyssa Grant, 4 days before the crime. She read each word clearly. Wonder what it really feels like to pull the trigger. Maybe it's not as bad as people say." A murmur spread through the gallery, a few people shaking their heads. Madison sat motionless, no reaction, eyes coldly fixed ahead, as if the words had nothing to do with her. Miles did not miss that moment. She wrote those words, and 4 days later, Ethan Cole was shot 3 times at 2 meters away. She paused, lowered her voice, almost whispering, "Not by accident, not by someone else." Madison Reed wanted to know what it felt like, and she found out. Miles's next presentation focused on motive. She did not mention money or grudge, but directed the jury to look at the psychology. Why would a 19-year-old girl, with no enemies, no purpose, kill a stranger? The answer lies in how she acted. Madison Reed did not kill out of fear, but because she wanted control. She wanted to test the feeling of power, the feeling of holding someone else's life and death in her hands. Miles held up the psychological file the defense had submitted for mitigation. This evaluation, conducted by the defense's own expert, shows the defendant has power-oriented personality traits, enjoys manipulating others' emotions. She did not kill because she was hurt, but to prove she could do what others wouldn't dare. Miles approached the witness stand, placed her hand on the table, looked straight at the jury. Throughout the trial, she has not once expressed remorse. When hearing how Ethan Cole died, she shed no tears. When the victim's mother broke down, she looked over, then smiled. That is evidence of attitude, the attitude of someone who believes she is above others' pain. A short video was played, footage from the first interrogation, Madison sitting across from the investigator, arms crossed, eyes fixed, a fleeting smile when asked about the gun. Miles said nothing during the playback, letting the jury see for themselves. When it ended, she spoke slowly. "This is not the face of fear. This is the face of arrogance." The prosecutor concluded by reaffirming the link between all evidence, fingerprints, ballistics, blood, search data, and post-crime demeanor, all forming an unbroken chain. Each piece alone might be small, she said, but together they form a complete picture. And in that picture, only one person stands at the center, Madison Reed. The jury sat silent, no one speaking. An older man in the back row bowed his head, covering his face with his hand. On the victim's family side, Karen Cole clutched her son's photo, tears streaming endlessly. Meanwhile, Madison sat straight, expressionless, only glancing at the prosecutor with an unreadable look. Miles stepped back, gathered her papers, then looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests its case. Everything is clear. An innocent man was taken on Valentine's night, not for money, not for hate, but for the sick satisfaction of one individual. We believe that when you look at all the evidence, the jury will see what we see, the undeniable truth." In that moment, the room was absolutely silent. No keyboard clicks, no murmurs, only a heavy void between people facing the thin line between humanity and evil, and the cold truth gradually closing around the name Madison Reed. The next day, it was public defender James Holloway's turn to present the final defense for his client. He stepped to the podium calmly but heavily, holding a thick file containing all psychological reports and personal notes from over a year and a half working with Madison Reed. White light from the window slanted over his shoulder, reflecting off the defense plaque on the wooden table, a symbolic image of the final effort between two sides of justice. His voice was low and slow. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am not here to deny Ethan Cole's death. A young, kind man lost his life in an inexplicable act. But I am here to remind you that in the law, there is not only the truth of the act, but the truth of the person behind it." He looked at Madison. She sat motionless, eyes down, showing no emotion. Holloway began painting a picture of Madison's childhood. He said she grew up in a broken family in Colorado Springs. Father left when she was 10. Mother alcoholic and frequently moving. School records showed Madison was a smart but isolated student, investigated psychologically at 16 for self-harm. She did not grow up in guidance, but in abandonment, he said. And when no one teaches you how to love, you don't learn to value life. The attorney presented a clinical psychology evaluation report by an independent expert conducted while Madison was in pretrial detention. The report concluded she had borderline personality disorder and lacked emotional control under high stress. He read an excerpt. Defendant tends toward impulsive reactions in psychologically triggering situations with limited awareness of consequences. Behavior may be self-destructive or externally directed. Holloway looked up at the jury. "I am not saying Madison is innocent, but I am saying she did not kill with premeditation. No plan, no motive, no gain. This is not first-degree murder, but manslaughter, an impulsive act in a state of psychological disorder, not fully aware of consequences." He acknowledged the physical evidence against his client was strong, but urged the court to consider the human factor. A fingerprint, a gun, a search. They tell the story of the act, but not the story of the mind. Madison did not plan the murder. She was lost, she was scared, and she didn't know how to come back. Holloway continued analyzing. The prosecution describes her as cold, arrogant, but those who have interacted with Madison see a confused girl, withdrawn from society, trying to hide fear behind indifference. She doesn't smile out of confidence. She smiles because she no longer knows how to respond to this world. The attorney stepped closer to the jury box, lowering his voice. "If you see Madison not shedding tears, please don't think she feels no remorse. Some people cry outward, others lock pain inside. Remorse is not always loud." He paused for a few seconds, then continued. "She was 19 when it happened. A child just past adolescence, no family, no guide. If we believe justice must also carry humanity, then please give her a chance at rehabilitation rather than sentencing her to die." In that moment, Madison raised her head toward the jury. Her eyes remained cold, but her lips trembled slightly. No one knew if it was real emotion or a reflex at hearing the word chance. As Holloway returned to the table, Prosecutor Rebecca Miles immediately stood to rebut. Her voice was sharp and cutting. "Ladies and gentlemen, No one denies Madison Reed's difficult past. But thousands grow up in similar circumstances and still choose kindness. The past does not justify pulling the trigger 3 times into an innocent man's chest. She paused, looked straight at the jury, then said the line that silenced the room. No one accidentally pulls the trigger 3 times. Miles continued. The defense says this was loss of control, but Madison was not out of control. She drove to Denver, carried a weapon, stopped in a residential area, fired 3 accurate shots, then left in silence. That is not chaos, but order. Not impulse, but choice. She pointed at Madison, sitting silently at the defendant's table. We are not talking about a vague girl in crisis. We are talking about someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and afterward, chose to feel nothing. Judge Bennett had to gavel to remind both sides to follow procedure. Holloway gathered his papers, sat down, eyes heavy. He knew his humane defense, though full of compassion, was fragile against the cold evidence wall the prosecution had built. The trial recessed in silence. As Madison was escorted out, no one in the gallery spoke. Some jury members watched, faces torn between pity and anger. Holloway remained seated, hands clasped, quietly staring at the wooden table. He knew he had just gambled Madison Reed's last shred of humanity in a world where reason often triumphs over emotion, and hope, though faint, now rested only in the mercy of the 12 people sitting in front. On the 6th day of the trial, the main witness testimony officially began. Prosecutor Rebecca Miles called key witnesses one by one, those who had helped piece together the puzzle in the Madison Reed case. Each person who appeared brought a different perspective on that fateful night, from the victim's final ordinary moments to the defendant's chillingly cold behavior after the crime. The first witness was Daniel Price, 26, the night shift employee at the Circle K gas station on Evans Avenue, where Madison was seen just minutes before the shooting. He wore the company's green shirt, voice soft but clear. When Miles asked, he recalled that evening. She came around 10:30. I remember because that's when the station starts getting empty. She parked outside, silver sedan, then came in to buy 2 sodas and a bag of chips. She smiled, chatted lightly, asked if I often worked night shifts. Completely normal, not rushed at all. Miles asked him to describe Madison's mental state in more detail. Daniel replied, she didn't seem worried or tense at all. I even thought she was out having fun because she looked happy. When I said, have a good night, she turned back and smiled. That's the smile I remember forever, because the next morning when I saw her photo on the murder news, I couldn't believe it was the same person. The entire courtroom fell silent. The jury watched intently as Miles replayed the gas station camera footage. Madison appeared clearly in the frame, black jacket, hair tied high, confident walk, a fleeting smile before opening the door to leave. The second witness was Officer David Holt, the first to arrive at the scene on the night of February 14, 2009. He had served over 20 years in the force, voice calm but choked as he described the sight. When I got there, the victim was lying on his back, blood spreading on the snow, car door still open, shopping bag fallen beside it. No signs of a struggle. I knew right away this wasn't an accident. Holt looked straight at the jury. The distance between the casings and the body was just over 2 meters. The shooter stood very close. Intentional. This wasn't the act of someone scared. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Miles pressed. When you saw the scene, what was your first thought? Holt paused a second, then said, the coldness. Everything neat, precise, no signs of panic. Someone walked up, pulled the trigger 3 times, then left, like they just finished a small errand. After Holt left the stand, Miles called Karen Cole, the victim's mother. She walked slowly, holding a photo of Ethan, kind face, bright eyes. The entire room stood in silence as she reached the witness stand. Her voice trembled but clear. Ethan was my only son. He was a good person, never hurt anyone. That night, he called me before leaving work, said he'd stop at the store for some food then head home. I didn't know that was the last time I'd hear his voice. Miles let her pause before asking, When you see Madison in this courtroom, how do you feel? Karen clutched the photo, eyes toward the defendant. I tried to find in her eyes some remorse, some fear, but there was nothing. She looked at me like it had nothing to do with her. She wasn't afraid at all. Her voice broke, but she continued. I don't understand how someone can be that cold after taking another person's life. Many in the courtroom bowed their heads. Several jury members wiped tears. Next was Lieutenant Alan Brooks, the investigator who directly interrogated Madison on the day of her arrest. He was called by the prosecution to clarify her behavior in the early investigation phase. Brooks recounted, throughout the over 8-hour interrogation, Madison showed no fear. She was very calm, sometimes even smiled. I remember most when I asked why her fingerprints were on the gun. She said, "Because it's my gun." "What's wrong with that?" He paused, looking around the courtroom. "I've faced many killers, but very few could keep their voice that steady." She showed no emotion, no remorse, no confusion. Just emptiness. Miles asked further, "Did you see her cry or waver at any point?" Brooks replied, "No. When we told her the victim was dead, she just asked, 'Who was he?' Then smiled faintly. I thought it was a reflex, but even now I don't understand why she smiled." That statement left the entire courtroom breathless. Madison sat still, face expressionless, as if the story was about someone else. Defense attorney Holloway bowed his head, taking notes, but not interrupting. He knew his client's reaction, or rather, the lack of it, was rendering every mitigation effort meaningless. Miles concluded the witness portion by calling forensic technician Dr. Alan Kurtz to confirm the examination results. He presented briefly but convincingly. Based on the shot angle and distance, the shooter had to stand near the victim and aim downward as the victim fell. That was intentional behavior, no possibility of accident. As the witness testimony ended, the portrait of Madison Reed became clearer than ever. The witnesses did not just describe evidence, but painted a unified image. A girl calm and cheerful before killing, cold and nonchalant throughout interrogation, and emotionless facing the victim's family's pain. Each account, each small detail, was like a mirror shard, reflecting the same image. A person without remorse, without fear, and perhaps without knowing what mercy is. Judge Bennett announced a recess at 5 p.m. As police led Madison out, Karen Cole stood, watching, saying nothing. A few in the gallery began to cry. Madison, as always, walked silently, eyes empty. Only the metal door slamming shut behind her, an echo like the final period on any last hope of finding a shred of humanity in those eyes. On the morning of the 8th day of the trial, the atmosphere in Denver County Court was so thick everyone could feel the weight of the final hours. After nearly 2 weeks of presentation, cross-examination, confrontation, and witness testimony, the Madison Reed case entered the closing arguments phase, where both sides would make their final arguments before the jury retired to decide the fate of the 19-year-old girl who had shocked the entire city. Judge Harold Bennett opened the morning with a reminder. Today's session will focus entirely on legal arguments. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your duty is to determine the truth based on the evidence presented, not on sympathy or outrage. His voice was low, calm, but each word carried weight. Prosecutor Rebecca Miles spoke first. She stood in the center of the courtroom, voice firm, eyes fixed on the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have heard every defense, seen every piece of evidence, and the truth remains unchanged. Madison Reed killed Ethan Cole. Not for money, not for hate, not out of fear. She killed just to satisfy a passing thought, to see what pulling the trigger really feels like." Miles walked slowly along the prosecution table, lightly placing her hand on the worn-edged file. Ethan Cole was a young engineer, a simple man who harmed no one. On Valentine's night 2009, he just wanted to go home, pick up some food, end an ordinary day. And then, he met Madison Reed. Her voice dropped. 3 shots. No words, no chance. The prosecutor recapped each piece of evidence, matching fingerprints, ballistics match, blood on the tire, online search history, and the haunting text to a friend. Wonder what it really feels like to pull the trigger. Each detail was like a silent knife thrust into the air. Madison sat at the defendant's table, back straight, eyes cold. When Miles mentioned her smile during interrogation, Madison faintly curled her lip, a brief smile, enough to make a few in the gallery shudder. Miles saw the reaction and did not miss it. She just smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice turning grave. She smiled when hearing mention of the death of the man she killed. That is not innocence. That is the attitude of someone who believes she is above others' pain. Karen Cole, the victim's mother, bowed her head sobbing, while Madison kept staring at the prosecutor, saying nothing. When Miles finished, no one in the gallery breathed heavily. The silence stretched until Judge Bennett spoke. "Thank you, Miss Miles. Defense, Mr. Holloway." Attorney James Holloway stood, adjusted his glasses, voice slow but somewhat weary. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began. "What makes this case tragic is not just Ethan Cole's death, but that we are trying a 19-year-old girl, a lost child." He paused, looking at Madison. "I am not asking you to forgive her, but I hope you understand." Holloway argued that Madison was a victim of an abandoned childhood, of untreated psychological disorders. He held up the psychology report. Experts concluded Madison has borderline personality disorder, with tendencies toward impulsivity and loss of control under stress. This is not the mind of someone plotting crime. This is a damaged mind, a girl who hadn't matured yet. He lowered his voice, facing the jury. "If justice is only punishment, then we have forgotten the humane part of the law. Ethan Cole is gone, and nothing can compensate. But sentencing Madison to a lifetime in darkness does not make the world fairer." Rebecca Miles objected immediately, but the judge allowed him to continue. Holloway said, "She made the biggest mistake of her life. But the difference between a monster and a human is the capacity to be reformed. I am not asking for her freedom. I am only asking you to recognize this act as manslaughter, not first-degree murder. No plan, no intent, just a moment of being lost." As he spoke, Madison maintained the same expression, sometimes bowing her head, whispering something to herself. When the prosecution mentioned 3 shots, she smiled faintly again. A thin smile like a thread. Some in the gallery shook their heads. Others sighed. Judge Bennett called for order and addressed the jury with legal instructions. "You must weigh between 2 factors, youth and cruelty. The law does not distinguish age when a crime is committed with intent. But you may consider psychological circumstances if you believe the act lacked premeditation." He paused, looking at Madison. "The truth has been presented. Now your responsibility is to decide what justice demands." In the back, reporters scribbled furiously. Outside, noon news broadcasts were already airing, "Madison Reed case divides public, young genius or cold-blooded killer." Many gathered at the courthouse entrance, holding signs, "Justice for Ethan," while others raised placards, "No child deserves life in prison." Denver had never seen a case where the line between sympathy and outrage was so fragile. In the afternoon, both sides were allowed final statements. Miles reaffirmed her argument, "No one accidentally pulls the trigger 3 times, and no one randomly leaves the scene with a smile." Holloway responded briefly, "No one is born a killer." At 5:15 p.m., the judge declared a recess. The 12-member jury was instructed to retire to the deliberation room to begin the process. The door closed, the gavel struck 3 times, an echo resounding in the empty gallery. Karen Cole sat silently, arms tightly hugging her son's photo, eyes blurred with tears. Madison was escorted out, still walking slowly, eyes cold and face expressionless. No one in the room knew if it was calm or defiance, but clearly she was not afraid. Outside, Denver's sky turned the copper red of sunset. The city paused in waiting. Inside the thick walls of the courthouse, 12 people were deliberating between humanity and justice, between a young girl and an unforgivable crime. After 2 days of tense deliberation, on the morning of August 12, 2010, the jury returned to the courtroom with weary but resolute faces. The door opened. Everyone in the gallery stood. The atmosphere was thick, silent enough to hear the soft steps of the jury members as they entered. Judge Harold Bennett looked at them in silence, then asked a familiar question. "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged man with silver hair, stood, voice firm. "Your Honor, we have reached a unanimous decision." He handed the paper to the clerk, then returned to his seat, eyes avoiding the defendant. The clerk read slowly, each word deliberate. On the charge of murder in the first degree, the jury unanimously finds the defendant Madison Reed guilty. The final words rang out clear as a knife, tearing through the silence. A choked sob escaped from the front row where Karen Cole, the victim's mother, sat clutching her son's photo. On the other side, Madison sat straight-backed, eyes fixed on the judge. No sign of surprise or collapse, just absolute stillness, as if she had known the outcome long ago. Judge Bennett bowed his head to read the sentence. His voice low and steady, having considered all evidence testimony and the jury's conclusion, the court declares, defendant Madison Reed is guilty of first-degree murder. Pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 18-3-102, the defendant is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He paused, looking directly at Madison. "Miss Reed, your actions took the life of an innocent man and shattered a family. You had the chance to show remorse, but you never did. Today, justice is served, and your silence will accompany you for the rest of your life." The entire courtroom was dead silent. All eyes turned to the defendant. Madison sat motionless for a few seconds, then tilted her head slightly. A faint smile flickered across her lips, brief but enough to freeze the room. A reporter in the back row instinctively snapped a photo, capturing the moment. A smile as life imprisonment was pronounced. Karen Cole burst into sobs, family members helping her out. Some jury members bowed their heads, avoiding Madison. Prosecutor Rebecca Miles stood still, hands clenched on her file. When asked by reporters after the session, she said briefly, "This is the penalty for arrogance. No one is above the law, and no one has the right to treat human life as an experiment." Meanwhile, Madison was escorted out by two officers. She turned once, glancing over the crowd, eyes holding neither fear nor anger. When a reporter shouted, "Do you have anything to say?" Madison just shrugged, smiled faintly, then walked away. That smile, seemingly calm at first, but in context, carried a tone of defiance, an expression that chilled many more than the sentence itself. Immediately after, major newspapers ran the story, "Madison Reed, 19-year-old killer smiles at life sentence." The photo of her leaving court with a faint smile appeared on the front page of the Denver Post the next morning, headlined, "The Smile of Crime." TV news replayed footage of Madison being led away, face calm between two officers, while behind her came the victim's family's choked cries. Public reaction was deeply divided. Some called her the embodiment of modern indifference, others, the face of psychological disorder. On social media, the phrase "the smiling killer" spread rapidly, turning Madison into a symbol of a new kind of crime, motiveless. The sentence was seen as harsh but reasonable. Though attorney James Holloway had tried to invoke youth and psychological disorder for leniency, the jury's decision showed they did not believe Madison lost control. Instead, they saw a young person acting with intent, fully aware of consequences yet choosing to proceed. When asked about his reaction after the verdict, Holloway said, "Only, I did everything I could, but perhaps Madison didn't need saving either." Those words summed up the feeling of many in the courtroom that day, that the girl felt no remorse, no fear, she simply accepted her fate as inevitable. That same afternoon, as Madison was transferred to Denver County Central Detention Facility, reporters still waited outside. The police car door opened, Madison stepped out, hands cuffed, light blue prison uniform, face without makeup. She glanced briefly at the cameras, lips curling slightly, a final smile before disappearing behind the heavy steel door. In the evening news, Judge Bennett was quoted, "Justice is not revenge. It is a reminder that every action has consequences, and sometimes that consequence is a lifetime in silence. That night, the 9 p.m. broadcast replayed the entire sentencing moment. The gavel strikes, the judge's low voice, and the 19-year-old girl's fleeting smile. The image spread across America, becoming the case's icon, for the inexplicable coldness, and for the haunting question that lingered for years. What makes someone smile at a life sentence for murder? 2 weeks after the sentence, Madison Reed was officially transferred to Colorado State Penitentiary, a maximum security facility in Canyon City, for inmates sentenced to life or death. She was placed in the high-risk female isolation wing, cell 217, just over 8 square meters, with an iron bed, sink, and small window facing a thick concrete wall. On her first day, Madison said nothing to anyone. When the guard asked if she wanted to call family, she replied, "No one to call." Records showed no family or friends ever registered for visits during her incarceration. Other inmates quickly learned of her through rebroadcast news. They called her by a nickname that spread through the wing, the girl who smiled. The nickname carried both mockery and a touch of fear, as no one understood why a young girl could smile after a lifetime behind bars. Guards said Madison rarely spoke, only short sentences, always calm. Evenings, she read books, wrote regularly in a leather notebook, sometimes sat for hours, staring out the narrow window at the faint glow of security lights. The facility had no record of any infractions. Madison followed every rule, caused no trouble, filed no complaints, requested no leniency. She existed like a shadow in the cold corridors, leading many in the prison to describe her silence as more frightening than the screams of others. One female officer recalled, "I once asked if she regretted it. She looked at me, smiled, then asked, 'If I said yes, would you believe me?'" While Madison sank into her closed life behind bars, outside, her case continued to haunt the public. 5 years later, the documentary series Crimes of the Decade re-aired the entire case under the title The Smiling Killer of Denver. Crime analysts called it one of Colorado's most emotionless murders, evidence of a trend in motiveless youth violence. A psychologist on the show said, "Madison Reed didn't kill out of hate or greed, she killed to know what it felt like to hold life and death. That's the mark of a generation disconnected from the value of life." In Denver, the community never forgot the victim. In 2012, Ethan Cole's family and colleagues established the Ethan Cole Memorial Scholarship Fund, supporting software engineering students at the University of Colorado. Each year, the award ceremony was held on February 14th, the day Ethan died. His mother, Karen Cole, though aged, always attended, speaking in a low but firm voice, "I don't want anyone to remember my son through pain. I want them to remember that Ethan believed in people, and we must keep believing, even when the world sometimes doesn't deserve that belief." The scholarship quickly gained wide support from tech companies in the state. Many recipients later said they chose engineering because they felt connected to Ethan's story, a man who lost his life while living an ordinary one. For them, it was a way to turn tragic memory into something positive, to make a senseless death not useless. For Madison, her name gradually became a metaphor in media. Newspapers, sociological studies, even criminology classes referenced the case as a lesson in the decline of humanity. Discussions revolved around the question, what makes a 19-year-old girl, with no hate, no despair, choose to kill a stranger and smile at her sentence? Years passed, the question remained unanswered. Psychological profiles, digital data, contradictory testimony, all only touched the surface of her mind. Madison never wrote letters, never gave interviews. She maintained complete silence, letting others guess. In the prison's 2018 annual report, the only note about her was brief. Inmate Reed, no incidents, no visitors, no requests. 10 years after the sentencing, when media revisited the case, Madison's smiling photo remained the symbol of emotionless crime. It appeared on magazine covers, in social commentary, as a reminder of the fragility of the line between humanity and evil. In Denver, every February 14th, people still brought flowers to the old Cherry Creek parking lot where Ethan Cole fell. No more police tape, no cameras, just a few candles burning quietly in the cold wind. The case closed, justice served. But in the minds of those who witnessed it, one question remained unerasable. Why did she do it? A question without answer, lingering like a cold echo, much like Madison Reed's smile, the smile that still haunts Denver to this day. The story of Madison Reed, the girl who smiled, is not just a shocking 2009 Denver criminal case, but a reflection of a reality that still haunts American society today. Isolation, disconnection, and moral crisis in a generation raised amid technology pressure and lack of emotional guidance. Madison didn't kill for money or hate. She killed just to know what pulling the trigger really feels like, an act meaningless to the extreme. That detail, along with her smile during sentencing, exposes the dangerous void between intellect and humanity, between knowledge and emotion. She is a product of a society where empathy is replaced by cold curiosity, where the internet teaches how to shoot more easily than how to understand others. In today's America, with school shootings, mass shootings, and youth crime still ongoing, Madison is not just a lost individual. She is a symbol of what happens when we no longer teach children the limits of power and the value of life. The lesson is not in fear or punishment, but in restoring human connection. We need to talk more with teenagers, help them understand that emotion is not weakness, but the foundation for living with compassion. The story of Ethan Cole and Madison Reed reminds us that in modern society, when curiosity overtakes compassion, evil no longer wears the face of an enemy. It can be the neighbor's child, the one smiling during sentencing, and a warning that justice cannot replace lost love. If you believe stories like Madison Reed's case remind us of the value of understanding and compassion, please subscribe to join us in continuing to explore the true hidden corners of humanity behind crime. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video, where every story is not just about sin, but a wake-up call for all of us.